everyone. I got a pretty awesome guest coming on to help discuss with me and educate me on some CFL quarterbacks. As you know, we talk about USFL quarterbacks all the time, XFL quarterbacks all the time. I've been dabbling in the CFL space, but I needed to bring in an expert. So, without further ado, Coach Phil, say hi to everyone, and let's start getting into some of this. Is this an epidemic? It's not a pandemic because pandemic would be international, right? But this is definitely an epidemic that we're dealing with right now.
Yeah. Well, it's been more of a. First of all, thanks for having me. It's been a crazy situation. Noticing just every week it's a new quarterback going down, and then even just yesterday we saw Vernon Adams go down, and he's going to be down for a few games. But in BC's case, they got Dane Evans. They're not hurting. They'll be all right. But across the league, it's just sad to see that so many quarterbacks are getting hurt, and I kind of hold the league a little bit accountable by just not really protecting the quarterbacks and not really putting them in a position to be cared for in a sense. Because you always know, like last year with Nathan Rourke, when he went down, the BC Lions, they just weren't the same without him, and you felt like their offense in general was struggling. So I just hope the league can do something to not necessarily favor the quarterback, but still protect the quarterback in a way.
Well, I think something the NFL did is, and you can argue that air quote the NFL got softer, but in the end, like, we don't really want to see 2016 Jacoby Brissett, and like I get like the Patriots were a different beast with the Brady suspension, but going back to 2008, not seeing Tom Brady off that 2007 season. And granted, Matt Castle put up some great games and great stats. For every Matt Castle in 2008, there's, a dozen other quarterbacks that we see that we're just like, yeah, I never want to see this again. So in my, as I go through these lists of these CFL guys, there's the internal debacle of you're sending guys to the XFL and USFL who would normally be in Canada. Who's next?
I mean, I wish that there were more guys from the USFL and even the XFL that would get a chance, because I would like to see a Luis Perez show what he can do in the CFL, because I love me some Luis Perez. I would love to see DeAndre Johnson from the USFL do his thing. He would be a monster in the CFL. But so there's guys who deserve the opportunity. I just don't know if they want that, because the game is so different and the adjustment takes a while. But the league got to do something. It's not even like we're asking them to like go full, put in new rules and make it softer. I think you just need to do something where, okay, we know the quarterback is the biggest asset. He's the money draw. Again, like I said, we saw the success that BC had with Nathan Rourke and how he pretty much overnight changed the look of the league, and the eyes were on the league because of Nathan Rourke. And there were other quarterbacks, but just Nathan Rourke in general. So I just would like to see them do something.
It's funny you mentioned Rourke, because like I've casually watched the CFL. I've followed McLeod's career for years upon years. He's one of the most fascinating quarterbacks from a career standpoint I've ever seen. But like my initial CFL love, if you can put it, was like with Ricky Ray and Henry Burris, Darian Durant. It felt like, and correct me if I'm wrong, 10 years ago there was this kind of golden age of CFL quarterbacks, and I don't know if we look at things through like the nostalgia and whatnot. I don't know if maybe that's what I'm doing, but like I felt like I looked through those at the time 8 teams, like 5 of these guys I can remember off the top of my head. Even Anthony Cavillo a little bit like before me watching the game, but it felt like there was always a guy. And even Bo's been around for a while. Trevor Harris been around for a while, and then was it Matt Nichols or Mike Riley? I can't remember which one. But Mike Riley putting up, CFL numbers and whatnot. And it was just like, now, and I don't want to diminish these players because I do think there's a lot of potential. Like, I live in Missouri, so I knew who Dustin Crum was.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like Dustin Crum's a good quarterback. It just seems like he's kind of kind of manzelling out there a little bit at times, and it's not, it's working, but how
Yeah.
long does it work for you? It's giving me Tebow mania vibes.
You took the words right out of my mouth, and I said that in one of my videos, the game against Winnipeg, that he pulled a Tim Tebow, Cam Newton type performance. But I respect that, you bring up like your love, like where your love came from, because for me I'm big on the history aspect, and for me I kind of always look at the early 90s to late 90s era with obviously Doug Flutie, Matt Dunnigan, a early like mid 90s Anthony Calvillo when he played for Las Vegas. I was thinking recently, like a couple of days ago, like there's always a shift. Even in the NFL, there's always like that shift where the new crop is coming in. And it's hard for us as fans or people that analyze the game, it's hard for us to see the guys that have been around for 10, maybe 11 some years. They're starting to break down, or their time is coming. Look at Bo Levi Mitchell. He pulled a Russell Wilson and went to Hamilton, and then it didn't look good. It just didn't look right. And now he's hurt and all that, and hope for the best for him. But there's always that shift where now the young guys are starting to get their chance. And it started last year. So it all just depends on what's going to happen this year. But this year's the year. The shift is happening.
Well, I feel like in the NFL, though, the shift is a little bit more natural because there's 32 teams.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, Phillip Rivers is out. I believe it was Rivers. Mahomes kind of took, not that I think Rivers and Mahomes play the same or on the same level, but like one all-time, what was Eli, one all-time greats out. We have another coming in.
Yeah.
And then it's like, 2020, Drew Brees is out, and then Joe Burrow can take that. And now we've lost Tom Brady. It looks like Trevor Lawrence is going in there, and like you talk about Lamar and maybe Jalen Hurts. On the next a year or two. I need a little bit more from him. But you can go down these lists, and I feel like if we broke it down, like every time we lost that guy, we have another one coming in from the draft class or whatnot. To now, it seems like, we don't know what Bo Levi is going to do. We don't know what Trevor Harris is going to do, and we don't know what Jeremiah Masoli is going to do. And maybe they're, not on the same air quote level of greatness of whatever, but they're still in a smaller league. I'm feeling like it's not going to be a natural progression. We're kind of seeing it now, like going from Masoli to Dustin Crum, very evident. Taylor Powell looks good, and I think it looks good in some aspects, but we're dropping from Bo Levi to Taylor Powell. That's a lot different than Schlitz, kind of bridging the gap for a little bit.
I would say I have to agree with that. I think when we talk about like the shift, you got to also mention Trey Ford in the conversation. Now, I know Trey Ford is going through his own hell right now with Chris Jones, and when is Trey going to get a chance to play? But it's there. I think with him, if he ever gets a chance to play, whether it stays with the Elks or if he gets traded, he might be the driving force to be able to do that, because he is from Canada. He's the homeboy, the hometown boy kind of thing. They want to build around that, but it's hard to let go. And I know it's hard for some of the fans. It's going to be hard for them to let go of some of these older quarterbacks like a Masoli, a Bo Levi Mitchell. It's tough, but it has to happen in order for the game to progress, because you see the offenses are changing. When the offense is changing, the game plan and the scheme of things, different quarterbacks are coming in. And you see like a guy like Taylor Cornelius, who I've kind of crapped on most of the season because his game has been horrible. But the way the game is starting to change in the CFL, it's going to happen. And we have to just accept it, and we have to go with it. It's tough.
You mentioned the Elks a lot, and I saw you going back with Odell Willis a little bit, and I mean that was a lot. I didn't read the whole conversation. I was kind of getting the vibe of you ever see that meme where it's, I'm sorry that I'm not reading all that. Sorry that happened to you. Or
Yeah.
really happy for you. And I was like, because the first couple engagements are happening. I was like, man, I got to talk to Phil about this. And then like, I didn't look at my phone for like an hour and a half. And I was like, dude, this is still going. Like, but I mean, this Trey Ford situation is, there's very few teams in the NFL, and we even saw it. Like, like Matt Ryan last year could be like the closest example of like the team. A team's not doing well. You have this air quote legendary quarterback. Not that Cornelius is legendary, but you're 0-7. Like, what are you doing? Like, because I was talking to a CFL free agent that I talked to a decent amount, and he's like, yeah, I got a call from Edmonton. And I was like, man, I wouldn't go there. I was like, I'll probably get a call from Edmonton to play quarterback soon as well. So it's like, you trying to play that game, dude? Like, that does not look like a good situation to be a part of right now.
Well, first of all, shout out to Odell if he gets a chance to see this, man. First of all, I did not even know who Odell Willis was. And I always like to do my little homework, my little research, because I live for any smoke anybody brings my way on Twitter. I have no fear. So I come at if as long as you have facts, I will debate with you. And it was a nice conversation, and we kind of DM back and forth, and I understood he's loyal to Chris Jones. He loves Chris Jones, and I like to hear out from players. It was like, wow, okay, let me hear what he has to say, because he's been in the trenches with Chris Jones, and he had some good valid points about what he was saying. I had my points, and it was what it was, but the whole situation is just weird. I don't even know how to describe it, because I did a video on the article from 3 Down Nation about what Chris Jones said about Trey, and it doesn't make sense how, like, you're the head coach. Okay, look, you know football, you know the game. You expect the head coach to bring up his quarterback. But for someone like Chris Jones, who's won Grey Cups and has been to Grey Cups and has been successful as a coach, I feel like he has a little resistance to Trey because he's so young, and they've invested money into Taylor Cornelius with the contract extension. So from a business side, I understand with him being the GM, the head coach, and the defensive coordinator, why you would let him have that role. Those 3 roles, I have no idea, but he's trying to roll. He's got to roll with his guy that he invested money in, and I get it. But when you're 0-7 and it's obvious the guy is not working, you got to give the draft pick a chance. Like, let him spin, give him a chance to play. I don't know. I don't know. It's wild.
And when Taylor left the XFL to go to the CFL, I thought it was a good move. I didn't think Taylor was an NFL quarterback, but I didn't think he deserved to not be playing football, if that makes sense. He's in one of those groups, and the first season, I think he was 9 TDs, 13 interceptions, kind of thrown in there, but his athletic ability is way more underrated than I think people give him credit for, because he's kind of some nerdy looking accounting guy playing quarterback. Looks a little too lanky for me. So it's not like he's not a statue back there. And I think on Friday, he had like 57 yards on 5 carries or something, ridiculous like that. I do think, and we talk about this in nauseum, is like the quarterback gets way too much credit and the quarterback gets way too much blame. And I'm not saying Cornelius should still be starting, because I do not think he should at all. I think he should be in the CFL. I don't think he should be starting right now at this point in his career. But to go 0-7 at any level of football is hard, because like there's so much nuances to the game that like you kind of mess up at some point. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think there's a lot more issues in that organization that are obviously being not let out to general public and media. So I'm very concerned about the structural integrity of the organization, to where what's actually going on, and like, is how is Trey acting? Because that's the thing, is like, is it an attitude thing? Like, I don't know. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth because Chris Jones is a proven coach. What has he got? 3 Grey Cups or something like that?
4.
Like 2 as a head coach, 3 as a head coach.
Yeah.
So it's like he's done something right, you know. So it's like I get the leash with Chris Jones. Like, I don't think you fire him mid-season. I think he's earned the right to finish out the season at a minimum. But does he just not like Trey Ford? Like, are we just that like did Trey Ford steal his coffee or something like that? I don't know, because at 0-7, I'd be putting what the kid they had, Eric Boundary or Michael Boundary, back at quarterback. The fullback that they have, bring him back. So that's my opinion on it.
So let me before we go on to the next thing, let me just kind of give what I know and what I'm not, like I said, I'm not a media person. I don't go out looking for the juicy story and all this stuff and all that. But this is what I've learned from the Loyal Elks fan base, from people on Twitter. So they can't really afford to get rid of Chris Jones. They got a coach's salary cap. I'd never heard of that before, ever. I did not know what a coach's salary cap was, and it's crazy that they have it. But I
Is it
understand.
a salary cap or is it a budget? Because that's
they call it a salary. They literally call it a coach's salary cap. That's what they keep saying. And what they're saying is like what the how do I put this? Basically, I'm gonna paraphrase, but this is the best way I can put it. When they got Chris Jones, they're still paying off the other 2 coaches that they had prior. So they didn't have a choice. They didn't have any money left. Really, they said, "Hey, we're gonna let you do GM. We're gonna let you be head coach, and we're gonna let you have BDC." If they even let go of him, they would not be able to get anybody, and nobody would want to come to Edmonton working for like peanuts. And that's rough. And I understand, as an organization, there's a fine line between business and the product on the field. But this is something that they did to themselves, and that's them trusting 2 other coaches that didn't know what they were doing or didn't have success. I don't know the guys. I don't really know the full story behind it, but that's what I know, and that's what I've been told. So and I think also, from what I understand with Trey, this is just what I've heard, is that Trey can't read coverage. Trey can't. He's blind. And when I heard that, I was like, I heard people saying that. I was like, what do you mean he can't read coverage? Like, dude was a big time draft pick. Like, and I saw some film on him. Like, dude can play, but apparently, I guess in practice, he can't read coverages. He's more of a fancy toy. He's a better runner and athlete than he is an actual quarterback. So that's what I hear from the fan base. That's what I'm hearing from people. So we're not at practice. We don't really know if that's the truth or not. People could be just talking, but that's what I hear. And Chris Jones is so rigid, and he's a player's coach, from what I understand. Also, his players are loyal to him. He built this team the way he did in his own image of what he believes a successful team is, and that's great. But at some point, as a head coach, you have to know when to you got to adjust with the times, or you got to loyalty is going to kill you. You got to make moves, and maybe they can't afford to make moves to be able to give Chris Jones what he wants to be successful, but they got to ride this contract out. He's got 2 more years. We might be looking at a team that really might struggle.
And I've heard some things about the financials as well, and there have been times where I've looked at coaching staffs, and you can kind of tell, and you see this in college more, as they let go of a big time coach or a scandal happens. They're still paying the guy $9 million over 3 years, bring in someone internal who probably would have never gotten a shot, and it's like, hey man, make lemons out of dog poop. We don't care. Just get us through this era. And I mean, the CFL has been around for so long that I don't think it's going there anywhere. I don't think the Elks are going anywhere. So it's kind of like, in my opinion, I see a lot of, we're just going to do this. It's not going to look good, but guess what? We're going to have a team for the next 35 years. So instead of going bankrupt, winning 3 Grey Cups, and then not existing for 32 years, we're going to suck this up. And I think you could do that with a guy like Chris Jones because he's had success, and you can justify keeping him there even if they go 0-17 or 0-18, and you're just like, you're just kind of like, hey man, like we, give him a nice little severance retirement at the end of it, and
Right.
thank you for guiding us through the darkness, because like financials in the CFL is a very common conversation. Financials in anything but the NFL is a common conversation. So I'm curious to see, as an Elks fan, would you rather just have Chris Jones eat all this money, all this bad time, and then get Cornelius out of there in 2024, or excuse me, it'd be 2025, and then kind of move on, business as usual, fresh slate. We were air quote profitable, or if we are negative, we're not that much in the red, and then continue to progress through, because that's kind of the vibe I'm getting right now.
It's also like the fact that they are a community-owned team. It makes it really hard for like none of the decisions, no moves are made without, I guess the government, I guess, of Edmonton being able to say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. But it's hard. It's so hard for them to compete against teams in the league that are privately owned by one entity rather than like in the NFL. And I how do I put this? When it comes to Chris Jones, you're an NFL guy. You probably know what I'm about to say here. It's like when you see guys like when Joe Gibbs came back to Washington. Wasn't the most. It was like he wasn't at his best. The game, it kind of passed him by. He rode off in the sunset. Bill Parcells in Dallas, that type of thing. Like have a little bit of success. All right, right off in the sunset. There ain't no sunset looking forward right now for Edmonton with Chris Jones. It's kind of frustrating that the fans are saying we want him out, and then there's the other part of the fan base that says we can't afford to let him go. Like it's better to have him pissing in the castle than outside the castle. That's what it looks like to me with them.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably talk about Edmonton for way longer than anyone would care to talk about. But I guess keep going down this quarterback epidemic that we got going on. What else is kind of shocking you? Like, it was funny. I was talking in my group chat. Argos won again, and I was like, "Do you bench Chad Kelly at week 8? Or once you get the week like 8 wins, and then you're just like, stay healthy? like is that?" Kind of the moves, because I don't know much about Cameron Dukes. I know a decent amount about Brian Scott, but I mean, like, who are you giving that phone call to? Because I don't think McLeod's picking up a CFL phone call until September. Is it Ben Holmes? Like, Mike Glass is a guy that I'm really high on, that I think would be a very good third down quarterback. I mean, do you trade for? I mean, you can't trade for Dane Evans anymore, because he's kind of thrown into some of these guys that you're common on hearing in the trade, cycle. I don't think Nick Arbuckle is on anyone's, short list anymore. I think he's kind of ran out of his time. Maybe a Logan Bonner, but can you do that? You want to go with a rookie? Like, there's not many people that are giving me the good feelings when I'm looking at, like, okay, who am I calling right now?
I think this might be a crazy perception that I have, but ride with me on this. You might, because the pickings are slim right now. I think a lot of the teams might have to just change a little bit of their scheme to protect their quarterback, because I see, like with Winnipeg with Zach Collaros, they go play action a lot, but they also have a very, very solid run game that they can go to. It's not just them throwing the ball all the time. They have a great machine that they got going right now with Collaros on rollouts, on play action. He's not in the pocket long. They move the pocket. They make things safe for him. But I don't know. Some coaches are stuck in their own ways of doing things. They want to prove that their system is going to work, but to the detriment of your quarterback getting hurt, I can't rock with that. So we might need do you go get a guy who has never really played CFL, from the USFL or the XFL? I was surprised that what's the guy's name that he played for Birmingham? He just got signed by the Packers. Magoo. I was surprised that nobody went to go get him. I know that's a out there guy to go get. I know, but he has some cachet to him. Maybe he could get it. Maybe he can get his legs under him and do something. There's a lot of guys out there that if you put them in a position to be successful and you make the system surrounded around them, like what their strengths are, you might be able to get by. You might even be able to make the playoffs if you go get the right guy. But I don't know. It's a tough situation.
I mean, one guy who you mentioned was DeAndre Johnson. And while I don't think Johnson's by any means an elite thrower of the football, he kind of peaked for me. Like, I thought he was getting better. Like, some of his best passes were drops from his receivers. Like, set his feet, good transfer of the weight, like zipping it into this guy's hand. And then he had he got real cute. Last year they did this a lot, which you could do it in the 2-quarterback system on their RPOs, do a lot of dump offs to the tight ends and whatnot. And they made a lot of money figuratively doing that. This year it wasn't as much due to just kind of the system, I guess, putting more on his plate to where he had to throw the ball 30 times a game. But in my opinion, because the field's so wide and whatnot, I mean, I think DeAndre could do, and he can channel his own Tebow mania. I don't know how long that gets you, but I think it's an exciting product for a little bit. So in the end, you want these teams to make money as well. So you win 3 games because DeAndre Johnson rushes for 200 yards and then does nothing for the rest of the season. Like, I call that a win in the overall grand scheme of the business and whatnot. I mean, but looking around, like looking at the realistic roster of who wants to come play in Canada, especially a little bit later in the season, it's like, no one is like I had Pipkin. Pipkin obviously got signed. I think there was 2 other quarterbacks that signed for a week and then released. So it's like, to me, I think we've taken for a while guys like Dane Evans and Matthew Schlitz for granted because they were always there, and even a little bit of the Jake Mayer from last year. It's like kind of crazy. Like, Jake Mayer starting your games, you're kind of okay with that. Going from 22 to 23. So it's a real concern of mine.
It's a concern for me too, because when you think of CFL, you think of big numbers, you think of a lot of passing yards and all that. We have not really seen in this era, the way the offenses are set up, big, crazy numbers. We haven't seen that since the 90s. We haven't seen that since Dunnigan and Flutie and Danny McManus and guys like that were put up 6,000 yards. I mean, Matt Dunnigan threw for 714 one game. And you would think with the talent and the ability that guys have that there would be crazy, crazy numbers. And it's not. The game is just a lot of American guys can't translate and make it happen like they used to. And that's the tough part. There's not a lot of, I think, Canadian homegrown talent that can make it happen. Or even when you mention like DeAndre Johnson, I followed DeAndre Johnson even we all did from Last Chance U. Dude's always had the talent and the ability. It's just putting it all together in the passing game. Could he get it done? I thought he did really good with the Generals the first year, but then he had Luis Perez behind him. It's so. I've never seen anything like this before. I've been watching football for 29 years, NFL, everything. Never seen anything like this before. This is crazy.
Yeah, like as someone who follows the quarterback position, loves all levels of the game. Like I don't know the answer, and now that there's this forced shift coming on, where like we're like Trevor Harris, Bo Levi, we've talked about it
Yeah.
in circles at this point. It's kind of to me like, is the CFL going to be okay at that position? Am I going to have to watch Ben Holmes play? And like
Uh,
and I mean maybe a team makes a trade for Brian Scott, and maybe Brian Scott can do some magic and whatnot. But I mean now the teams that do have guys they like, are you trading Brian Scott? Like, are you trading these guys that you like? If Schlitz comes back and Bo Levi comes back, are you trading Taylor Powell? Like now because he has experience, you're just like, I'd rather keep this guy on the bench and figure it out, And I mean, there's a couple guys that are kind of stuck down on the depth chart. You got Chase Bryce is a potential guy who a lot of people thought could be decent in the USFL or NFL QB4. A guy that comes to mind is Jake Dolgala, like from Saskatchewan. But do you trade him? Like he has a little bit of experience from the NFL and Canada. Like, do you trade him if you're Saskatchewan now because you're going down to your QB2 with Mason Fine? Like, it's such a weird like situation going on.
well, as a Rough Riders fan, our quarterback situation is so crazy right now as well. With Trevor going down, and then we got Mason playing. I'm hoping Mason Fine does not get hurt. I in the small increments of what I've seen with Mason Fine, even yesterday's game against BC, he had some moments. He looked all right, but I pray to God Mason Fine doesn't get hurt just off the fact that I know who's behind him. And I'm not the biggest Shea Patterson guy. I am not. I have zero confidence in Shea Patterson. If something happened, knock on wood, to Mason Fine, and Shea Patterson comes in and make a run, okay, I'll eat my words. But I've never been a big Shea Patterson guy. I did not like him when he was in the USFL. He was a bust there. They hyped him up and was like, "Oh, he's the number one pick." He was the number one QB pick in the USFL draft, right?
Yeah,
It was he had Jeff Fisher, so
Well, he was forced to be the number one pick. There's a story behind that.
Well, wait, I want to hear this. I didn't know this. Please
I
tell
don't
me.
know if this is true or not, but I've heard rumors of that Shea to Michigan was the move because Michigan man, even though he played at Ole Miss, Bart and Brian were two peas in a pod, and then they wanted Teamu with Todd Haley. From what I've heard, can't confirm on it, but people who close to the league have told me some things, and it kind of made sense, like from a PR standpoint. But I mean, we'll see. We'll see. Like Shea had his moments in the USFL. He looked great at sometimes, and then other times he just, what are you doing there, Cheech?
No, I gotta, I respectfully, I gotta sit here and say, after watching the first season of the USFL, there was nothing as bad as Shea. Well, I take that back. Pittsburgh Maulers, that was the worst thing I'd ever seen in the USFL, but that's another story for another day.
Yeah, because
but
even Josh Love had moments this year, and
mhm.
even Lawletta looked semi-capable at times with the Generals. Poor Roland Rivers going in there, and Vad Lee looking like they had never played football before, and then they leave, and then you got Troy Williams looking like an adult out there.
I was so hyped up to see, what Birmingham was going to do. And I know we're talking CFL, but just real quick, like I was so excited to see what Birmingham was going to do. And then Jamar Smith went out, got hurt. By the way, I found the funniest. He's funny on Twitter, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That the whole what situation that had me in tears because he was cutting up. But yeah, with the whole CFL thing, man, I think it's also gonna like it's in the darkness of everything that's going on. We also forget that they've got some pretty good running backs in the CFL. So maybe we'll start to see that the run game is starting. The running backs might be able to establish themselves, and with Brady Oliveira and AJ Olad, and when Kadeem Carey comes back and Jamal Morrow, like there's some really good running backs in the CFL. And if teams kind of lean on the run a little bit more, maybe that'll help them protect their quarterbacks a little bit. Who knows?
Yeah, and I think that's a conversation for another day. But I think with these younger guys coming up, I start leaning heavy on running backs, and I start, really kind of, I don't want to say risking it, but going more to like in two down sets, like two rushes back to back, regardless of what's going on. I think we could. I don't know if the word is entering a golden age for running backs, but I think we have the potential to, based off what we're seeing at quarterback with injuries and whatnot. Because I think at some point something's got to add up, and I don't know. It's a lot of craziness at this quarterback position. It's something I've been thinking about for the last couple of days, maybe a week or two. Especially with Masoli, that really, and it just seems like every week we're seeing more and more. And something I pulled up was like the average year in CFL, you see 17 quarterbacks throw 50 or more passes, like from 2016 to present. And right now, I think they're at 13, and we're going into week 7, week 8. So, I mean, that number is only going to grow, in my opinion.
But at what point do we hold accountable the offensive coordinators and the head coach? At what point do we hold them accountable for putting the quarterbacks in the positions where they get hurt? Like, do we look at them and say the play calling? Do we look at what they're doing in certain situations and be like, why would you call that? Or like, one thing that frustrates me, like in this is dated back to last year too, with Cody Fajardo. They try to run read options with him, and people try to tell me, "Oh, Cody could kind of run." No, you don't run a Cody Fajardo. You let him work in the pocket. He's not that guy to run. But Jason Moss continuously, even in Montreal now, he'll throw in that read option, and Cody will run. You are putting this man in position to get hurt. Like, we got to hold these coaches accountable too. And I know people don't want to hear that, but the coaches can't be making these wild, asinine calls and making a pocket quarterback a running quarterback because it's the cool thing to do. Like, don't do that. Don't do it.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you look back at the college film and you see like he's in Fajardo's a Nevada guy, so you kind of see the legacy of what Nevada quarterbacks have done. Like, and you kind of were like, oh, this guy did it, so that obviously means this guy can do it. And it's like, it's not usually how it works, Cheech. I mean, Carolina Panthers had a good thing with Jake Delhomme for a couple of years. Cam Newton came. Just because it's the Panthers doesn't mean that's the identity. Coaches change. I mean, we could talk about offensive line. There's not enough left tackles in the NFL. You think you're going to have a couple in the CFL, USFL, or XFL? Like, offensive line is always going to be a revolving door for every level of football, not just the CFL or XFL, USFL. The NFL has trouble all the time with their Jason Peters. That's why Jason Peters is still in the league, because they'd rather deal with Jason Peters than John Smith from Louisville. Like,
yeah.
I don't know, Phil. Like, it is what a time to be alive if you're following this football space.
You never would think that we would see so many quarterbacks go down. I mean, you mentioned it before, like when Tom Brady went down. Like every once in a while, there's a quarterback, an injury just shocks everybody, and then the league has to change the rules. I don't have an answer. I really don't. There's so many variables to this situation. We talked about the shift. We talked about I mentioned it could be you could change the scheme up. They could implement some rule changes, but at the end of the day, you got to go out there and play the game. The game is what it is. You know what you signed up for. Everybody plays a role in what happens out there. You can't deny it. I wish fans. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. Sometimes fans are their worst enemies. And sometimes fans have to realize that there are many, many, many levels to the game. I understand fans want, we need to go get this guy. We should do this. Coach should do this. No, you got to be realistic, man. A lot of fans got to be realistic in the CFL. I know, and it's the beauty of the league is that the fans are so knowledgeable. They're loyal. They know everything. They're so, you understand what I'm saying? Like, they're intertwined with the league. But not everybody needs to be behind the curtain. You feel what I'm saying? Like, you got to let these people do their job. You got to let them do their thing in the organization. You might not like what they do, but they're working with what they got. That's what I'm worried about right now, too, is fans are going to say what they're going to say. They're going to say, oh, we need to go get this guy. Why didn't we go get Pipkin? You mentioned Pipkin. Why didn't we go get Pipkin? Well, maybe Pipkin doesn't fit the scheme. Maybe this guy doesn't go with what we got. You feel what I'm saying? So I don't know.
Well, I don't want to give you an aneurysm, man, because it seems like we're it's just becoming nauseating. I feel like at this point we're talking in circles, and a lot of good stuff brought out today. A lot of good talk about Edmonton and whatnot. But Coach Phil, where can we all find you before we wrap this up?
Oh man, you can find me on YouTube, CoachPhilReacts425. I'd react to a lot, pretty much every regular season game, playoffs, Grey Cup, everything through CFL. I do Throwback Thursdays as well, where I react to one former player highlights and one game from the past on Thursdays. You can find me on Twitter, Coach Phil Reacts. You can find me on Instagram, Coach Phil425, and so on and so forth, man. That's where y'all can find me.
And guys, this guy's one of the top dudes regarding CFL and whatnot. So make sure you follow him, react to him. And if not, if you just want to look from afar, sometimes he's got some pretty engaging Twitter interactions as well. So, guys, appreciate everyone tuning in and whatnot. Thank you, Phil, for coming on. We'll probably do this again in a couple weeks. But once again, guys, CFL quarterback epidemic 2023. What a time to be alive.
How sweet it is.
How sweet it is.